Hi everyone, my name is Mandi Goodsett and I'm the Performing Arts and Humanities Librarian as well as the Open Educational Resources and Copyright Librarian here at Cleveland State University. And in this lightning talk, I'm going to be talking about our process for crafting a generative AI policy for our OER publishing program. So to give you some context about our program here at CSU, we, the Michael Schwartz Library, have been offering small grants. We call them textbook affordability grants since 2016. At that time, in that time, we've worked with dozens of faculty to adapt or create zero-cost materials, and we've saved our students more than $2 million. The projects don't have to result in an openly licensed textbook, but the end product must be free for students so they can use library licensed content, free content, whatever they like. Each grantee works with a small team consisting of me as the OER librarian, copyright person on campus, our subject librarian for that faculty member, our Pressbooks expert, Barb Loomis, and a representative from our Center for E-Learning to help with any integration into our learning management system. And our program has been really successful, even though we are a pretty small shop. We aren't able to offer all the bells and whistles of a larger, more well-funded program. I think we've still made a lot of progress and I'm really proud of it. So regardless of what kind of OER program you have on your campus, you probably know that using openly licensed content has a lot of benefits. They can certainly save students money, but beyond that, they can improve student academic outcomes, increase faculty members' flexibility in the classroom, improve the student classroom experience, and promote inclusivity. So if OERs are so great, why haven't they been adopted in every class? And I think you probably can think of some reasons if you're listening to this. There are just still a lot of barriers to OER adoption, although the community's working on it and those barriers are getting smaller. One big one, OERs don't exist for every subject area, or maybe they do exist, but they are not exactly what the faculty member wants. It's really important that faculty have control over their course materials and full academic freedom. So if the commercial text is the best option for them, that is just the situation. For many faculty who are teaching really large classes or have big workloads, ancillary materials that come with commercial text, those PowerPoint slides, quiz banks, things like that, are essential to being able to teach the course. So again, while we're making progress in the open ed space with this as well, there just aren't always ancillary materials with every open textbook. And finally, it takes time and energy to switch to any kind of new course materials. And faculty have little of this to spare. They've got a lot going on. So here's a question. Can generative AI solve all of these problems for us? So OERs don't exist for every subject. You can ask the generative AI tool to create materials meeting your exact specifications, and it will do that. Whether it's a very obscure topic or something that, there's lots of information about it, it will do what you want. Generative AI tools can also quickly and easily make ancillary materials, either based on existing content that you feed into the tool or based on your prompt, whatever you might need. Switching course materials takes time. Well, generative AI tools work really fast and they are very easy to use. Although I will say, no matter what, it's going to take time and expertise to create a textbook, but it certainly could make the process a lot easier and quicker. And I think that a lot of this work aligns really well with generative AI strengths. So AI works best when the outputs can be judged by an expert. We don't want to rely on it for factual information. We want to make sure we apply our own expertise to it. A person teaching a textbook should be exactly that. They should be an expert in the field. They should be able to take what's there and work with it. The way AI condenses lots of established knowledge down into something kind of a synthesis, a tertiary source, that works really well with what textbooks already are. They should be this collection of common knowledge. They shouldn't really be making new claims or moving into new territory. They should really just be kind of rehashing what is well established, and that's really what AI does well. AI can also generate content very quickly, very efficiently, as I said, and it can generate content that's very customized to a student's needs. So we can make content that is very customized to the place that we're in. You know, in my case, Northeast Ohio, what are the businesses here? What are the spaces, the landscape here? What are the priorities of this community? And also to like the students in my exact class, I can make the content really match what their identities are, what their interests are. David Wiley, who is already a controversial figure in the open ed space, recently offered up the idea of generative textbooks. So with a generative textbook, a student could be given a prompt or series of prompts. They would put it into the generative AI tool. Then they would have a conversation with the tool until they understood the information. So it would be very different than saying, go read this thing. It would be a lot more interactive and customized to what the student needs. And I think in a lot of ways, students would prefer that to a traditional textbook experience. So it's an interesting idea. That said, it helps us transition into the next part of the presentation, which is about concerns and ethical issues with using generative AI in this way. So many of these will be familiar to you all. These tools necessarily reflect the human bias that exists in the data they were trained on. And not only that, it often will really amplify that bias because, as I said earlier, the idea is it's synthesizing lots and lots of ideas and it's trying to give you the most likely answer. So it's going to take stereotypes and really amplify them. And that's something that's really problematic when we're creating educational content. We know that AI tools hallucinate and they sometimes totally make up content and just very confidently report it to you. As I said, hopefully experts can judge the content and fix it. But in the case of the generative textbooks that I just mentioned, you know, students then are supposed to be ingesting that content, and will they know if it's wrong or right? They probably not. They're not experts in the content. So that's a really big problem with that idea. I always want to mention the environmental impact to run these data centers that power these tools and that do the training before we interact with them. They require considerable water and electricity. And this changes. Sometimes we hear that it's less than we anticipated and the impact is not so bad. And other times we hear, actually, we're using it more now. So the lack of transparency is really challenging, but it's something we really do need to always keep in mind. And then when it comes to copyright implications, this is a really tricky area. So there's kind of two parts. There's the training data, the inputs, and then there are the outputs. And there are some really good arguments for the idea that generative AI companies' use of copyrighted content as training data is actually a fair use. So the amount of work used is what we call de minimis. It's really small. For a single answer, it's just like tiny, tiny bits from lots and lots of sources. And the use is probably transformative. So it's kind of an entirely new way to use this data. Even groups like the Library Copyright Alliance and other library organizations have supported this interpretation. And as a copyright librarian, I kind of tend to agree with it, although I'm not a lawyer. I think it gets more complicated when we're talking about visual works as opposed to textual works, and I could definitely be convinced otherwise. I just think that using AI to create visual works can have a more direct impact on the ability for creators to make a living. When it comes to outputs, it's possible to write a prompt that would result in an output very similar to copyrighted content, but it's not really what the tools are built to do. And that is actually an important consideration in previous copyright cases, like what is the tool trying, what is it built to do? It's not really built to violate copyright. Now, all of this is, of course, being worked out in the courts. Right now, generative AI outputs are not protected by copyright. This is being contested a lot, so things could change. And all of this is about legal frameworks. This is not about ethics. And I think that's where some folks in the open education community are very hesitant to use AI, and others are very enthusiastic. I have heard leaders in the open ed community say we should not use AI at all for content creation, and others kind of pointing out all of those barriers I mentioned earlier and how AI can help us overcome them. Why shouldn't educators be in this space? It shouldn't just be tech bros. Let's use these tools to actually do some good in the world, especially in this increasingly financially difficult moment for higher education. Maybe these tools can help us. So it's kind of a complicated landscape. What's the upshot? When faculty are creating content through our programs and they do need some kind of guidance, dictating what they can and can't do with AI is really difficult. The landscape is constantly changing in terms of what the tools can do, what parameters they set on privacy and ethics, what the law says is okay. There are also a variety of ethical concerns, as I've said, and I think a lot of them tend to involve a very personal process of weighing pros and cons, costs and benefits. That's very difficult for like me to impose on someone else. We're also under constant pressure in higher education to innovate, to be productive, to work quickly, often with the same or even fewer resources than in the past. And in that environment, we feel a lot of pressure to use these tools. And finally, the faculty that we work with in these programs, they have different needs, different preferences, and they may be huge fans of AI, see no problem with using it, or they may feel very hesitant. So it makes it really difficult for us to craft policies or guidelines that are supposed to stand the test of time. But I gave it a try. So here's how we're handling it right now. For individual use, how faculty want to use AI is totally up to them. When it comes to our grants and other projects, we have generated some guidelines and I have a QR code right there. Basically, we allow the use of AI for text generation in textbooks as long as the author is transparent about their use, reviews the AI generated content really carefully for accuracy, and does most of the authoring themselves. And right now, we do not allow AI use for generating images without first having a discussion with us, mostly because I'm really concerned about the impact of doing that on artists who can make a living on creating images. I might change my mind though. So I'd love to chat more with you all about it in Discord. I also wanted to point out some very important resources, an example that I found incredibly helpful while going through this process. So Affordable Learning Georgia has created a really excellent policy related to AI use in their OERs. The Open Education Network's Pub 101 curriculum now includes an entire module about the role of AI in OER publishing with lots of helpful examples and readings. One of the amazing examples is the wonderful Liza Long's OER, Critical Worlds, A Targeted Introduction to Literary Analysis, which she co-wrote with AI Help, and she has written at least one more textbook with AI Help as well. Finally, if you want to talk about this more, have more of a discussion about the role of AI in open ed, there may be still room in one or more of the focus groups that Doers is organizing with the help of Will Cross and Meredith Jacob. And all of these links are in my slide, and I'm going to share those in the Discord so you can check all of this out. Thank you all so much for listening. Please feel free to reach out with questions or advice or ideas for collaboration. And I really look forward to chatting with you all in Discord. And here are my references. Thanks, everybody.